Very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm a trainee cytology screener and I'm also serving as chair Disability Staff Network. I welcome you all to our webinar on COVID-19 and shielding. I think this webinar is perfectly timed given the current circumstances. As we all know, there has been an increase in infection rate in our area. So our staff may have questions and concerns, and we'll try to address some of them today. Before we start, just a little housekeeping. All participants' mics are on mute, but I will encourage you to ask questions during the webinar by using the chat box, and our panel members will be answering your questions at the end. If there are any deep questions or any questions that require confidential answers, we'll make a note of them and we'll get back to you later. This webinar is scheduled for an hour and we're expecting to finish it on time, but the recording of this webinar will be available on our staff intranet page. I would also like to say this is our very first live webinar, so please bear with us if there are any hiccups or glitches during the session. We're not expecting any, but our apologies in advance if we do encounter one. I would also encourage you to pass on your comments and feedback by using the same chat box. Our Disability Staff Network called Debility was launched by Chief Exec Yvonne Armstrong in December 2019. And the aim of this network is to provide a safe space for our staff with disabilities and long-term health conditions where they can get together, support each other and learn from each other's experiences. It's a forum, you know, where our staff with disabilities, whether it's visible or invisible, can have a collective voice to increase accessibility, raise profile, and promote inclusion across all the departments of the trust. We really want our disabled staff to become ambitious about their career and themselves, and we want to send out a positive message about the trust that this is a place where they are respected, they feel valued, and they get equal opportunities. So I will request all our staff with disabilities and long-term health conditions to please join our network so that together we can promote positive attitudes about about us and raise awareness on disability equality. We meet once a month, and that's normally third Wednesday of the month. You can follow us on Twitter, and you can see the information on your screen. If you require any further information about our network, please visit our staff intranet page. You can find us on A to Z under the diversity and inclusion and then disability. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you our fantastic speakers. We have with us a very caring specialist nurse practitioner, occupational health Claire Hobson, kind and compassionate health and well-being lead Kerry Gowland, always calm and composed L&D administration team leader Catherine Castley, extraordinary creative senior pediatric occupational therapist Saskia Grassi, truly inspirational Northeast and Yorkshire cervical screening manager Trudy Johnson, and last but not the least, full of energy and courage, HR business partner Colin Knox. Also supporting this session, we have our very own vice chair and disability champ Mark Fowles from IT, strong and humble HR advisory assistant Humera Saeed, extremely supportive our tag champions Ebony College from Team Comms and David Bull from IT. Thank you, and I'm going to pass it over to Claire from Occupational Health.
Hello, hi, I'm Claire. I'm the Occupational Health Nurse Manager. I've been asked to join today to talk to you a little bit about shielding and how occupational health dealt with that and how we felt about that. So shielding was a real challenge for occupational health. We'd never dealt with anything like that before. We didn't know about coronavirus and COVID and what was happening, and it was a real challenge as there was no national guidance that was given in order to help us do any risk assessments. So it was really straightforward for those staff who received the shielding letter from the government, but a lot of staff didn't receive the letter, but they had concerns because they did have underlying health conditions which they felt put them at risk. A very large proportion of these staff were staff who are asthmatic, and we had to learn quite quickly around the treatments for asthmas, because obviously asthma has its severity is in different categories. So some people have severe asthma, some people have mild asthma, but we had to know what that was based on the treatments that they were on, and that was something completely new to us that we had to learn. There were also staff who had not received a government shielding letter, but had a number of underlying health conditions which all may have been classed as mild in the guidance that was issued. But when you combined all of those together, it then did put them at sort of higher risk of COVID. So it taken into account the ethnicity, the BMI, their underlying health condition. So it wasn't quite as easy to do that. And we're a very small team. There's myself, another nurse practitioner, and our consultant who were taking all of those calls. So we did sort of use each other as a guide, really, to try and pick together all the guidance that had been issued by the different sort of specialities to try and put together something that we could then advise staff on. So we needed to sort of manage these cases, the staff who had a number of different underlying health conditions, or ones that hadn't received a shielding letter from the government, by risk assessment ourselves until the trust devised their own generic risk assessment, which was sent out at a later time. However, that didn't really take into account shielding staff when that risk assessment was issued. We received over 1,500 calls from staff in the first 2 months of the outbreak, which was very challenging. And then obviously after that, now when shielding was then paused, we've received a number of calls from staff who've got concerns, who are then returning to work and sort of advising on what they need to have put in place to help them to come back to work, supporting their mental health as well as their underlying health conditions, and putting in things in place to help them get back to work. So it's been a very challenging period. If anybody has any questions, just put them on the chat and hopefully I'll be able to help answer them. But I can hand over now to Kerry Gowland, who's going to take the screen next.
I'm going to unmute and start again. Kerry Gowland from part of the HR team, and my job is around health and wellbeing, specifically staff health and wellbeing. So like Claire, it's been a really busy, challenging time over the last few months, because once we went into lockdown, we really understood quite quickly that the impact that this was going to have on the workforce. And we based our early modelling of our response on guidance from the British Psychological Society, which talked about the needs of staff that would be around basic needs, information needs, support needs, and psychological interventions, and what that would look like at each stage in terms of the pandemic. So the planning stage, the active stage, and the recovery stage. By the time we went into lockdown, we were straight into the active stage. The planning stage was short, but it happened, and we went very much into, right, what do we need to do now in practical terms to support our staff? So there was practical things like, you know, childcare. People needed help with childcare support, car accommodation, things like that. From a health and wellbeing perspective, we were really thinking about how do we make sure we're staying in touch with people. So we were doing things like making welfare calls to everybody who was at home with, if you remember at the very beginning, the testing wasn't available. So if you had symptoms, you had to stay at home, and we had a lot of people who were at home. We wanted to make sure we were staying in touch with them, and especially for children. We wanted to make sure that that wasn't just a one-off call, that we were staying in touch with them over the course of their shielding period to make sure that that connection with the organisation was still there. In terms of, a lot of our focus was around supporting the mental health of our workforce. So we did things like increased our counselling capacity. We introduced an employee assistance programme which had a 24-hour helpline. We organised retreat days for staff. We developed a health and wellbeing booklet. We were giving support to line managers. We implemented the Project Wingman facility at the QE and down at Bensham. So there was an awful lot of things happening, and the situation was changing regularly. In terms of our shielding staff in particular, we understood that for that group of staff it was going to be particularly challenging, and certainly the people that I've spoken to have talked about a huge range of emotions. The guilt that they wanted to be involved and be there on the ground helping people, and they felt guilty that they weren't. Exhaustion, frustration, relief for some people that they felt that they were that they weren't going to be in harm's way, because obviously a lot of our the whole point of our shielding staff is that they were our more vulnerable colleagues. But what was really clear was that there wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this, because every single shielding member of staff had a very individual circumstances and had a very individual response to what was happening. And so what we wanted to do from an HR perspective and from a health and wellbeing perspective was to really support managers to support their staff in an individual way. And also a compassionate way. We wanted managers to, you know, be compassionate about the support that they were offering people. So we have developed guidance which sort of helps managers to navigate the practical aspect of it. We've developed guidance for people who have been shielding and make sure that they're aware of all of the different offers that are on that are available to them. We've obviously got the risk assessments that Claire talked about, but not just for shielding staff, but also for people who were living with someone who was shielding, because that again was another challenge for people. We did things like have teams drop-in sessions for managers so they could come and ask the HR team questions. And what we've said to managers, given the current circumstances in terms of increased cases, is now's the time to review those risk assessments in light of that increase, and then make any adjustments that need to be made. So hopefully for our shielding staff, that's happening sort of as we speak. I think the message from HR and certainly from health and wellbeing is around that compassionate response that I talked about, and we very much hope that that's what staff are experiencing throughout the organisation. There's so much more to talk about. I'm very conscious of time, but if anyone does want to find out any more about our response, any of the help, please get in touch with me. Now I am going to pass you over to Catherine Castley. Thank you.
Hi there. Hi, my name's Catherine Castley and I'm the admin lead for learning development. And I'm here just to share a little bit of my experience. I've been shielding now since middle of March, quite strictly from the start, really. So, you know, we're into 6 months now, so it's had very much ups and downs. I would say probably on a plus point, because everybody looks at shielding, I think, and it's, oh, poor you. This is what I get all the time from friends and family. Oh, poor you, you must be up the wall, you must be tearing your hair out. And in some ways, some days, yes, you are, but on other days, it has been, on a positive note, quite nice to press pause on our life, I suppose. When this all started, because of the condition I have and medication, it was quite a strict bubble of 4. So I was informed early days by the hospital that it was very important for me and the household to be shielding. So that meant my husband as well, who's a key worker. He had to come home from work. His work really understanding, so he was furloughed straight away. And the children, obviously they had to come away from school because they were still at school at the time. And it was literally just the 4 of us for a good few months. Which, yes, you know, it was difficult at times, but like I say, to press pause on our life was quite special in some ways, because if you think about it, you never really get that opportunity to do that, where there was just the four of us and nobody was racing out on shifts, nobody was getting dropped off and picked up from here, there and everywhere. So we did, you know, we have made the most of it. We've said it's a good job we get along because I think in that situation it could turn, you know, where it wouldn't be very pleasant. So yeah, we're very blessed that way we've made the most of it. I would say really the hardest thing for me has been, I think it's very difficult, and I think people with a disability or a chronic illness will probably agree. I think when you're living it and it's you, it's never as bad. I always feel it's worse for those around me to watch me go through this. And I have sort of, we did identify mainly with my younger daughter Eve, she's 12. We didn't realise how much she was struggling until she sort of was waking up in the night and coming into our bedroom and wanting to sleep with me. And it wasn't until we sort of chatted to her on a one-to-one that we realised in her little mind all she was hearing all the time was death on the telly. You know, how they had to shield me. She was so worried about me getting it. She thought I was going to get it and die, you know, and you don't really understand what's going on in her little mind. So that really was sort of a big blow for us. And hardship, not seeing family, because I come from quite a close family. So that's been very difficult. And we have opened our bubble up a little bit for my parents and sister. But again, trying to stay outside and minimise contact. But I have got to say, the support I've had has been absolutely fabulous, right from Neil's work to work, ringing me on all the time, supporting me, hospital, my consultant. Part of my care is in a centre of excellence down in Liverpool. I've had constant contact with those. My GP's been ringing me to make sure I'm shielding. Did I need any support? I've had umpteen emails from places I never shop, Iceland and all over the place. Did I need anything? So really, that's been really, really good support from everybody. I can't complain about that at all. Work has been really good. Teams has been absolutely fabulous, and that has made me feel more part of the team still, rather than being working from home. So yeah, that's been great, and I do feel like I have fulfilled my role still. I do feel like I've been able to do the job, not probably to the standard I would prefer, but that's just a personal thing. You do want to be there, and I am very much a people's person where I like to interact with people. So that's been difficult, but certainly getting set up and working from home has been an absolute godsend, because I probably would have been up the wall if I hadn't have had the work to do, because like the ladies before me have said, working in the NHS has been so challenging, and priorities and systems and everything have changed on a sixpence within hours. Things have changed, and I think everybody stepped up and really worked hard and pulled together. And I think that's something quite proud to say that you were a part of that. And I think sometimes for us in the back office, it's not really recognised. Sometimes, you know, the nurses on the front line, but yeah, you are quite proud that you were part of it all. So yeah, so I'd say for me, there's been, I wouldn't say it's all been negative. There's some positives I could take away from it, but I am looking forward to getting back to normal. So that's it from me, and I'll pass you over now to Saskia.
Hello, I'm Saskia Grassi. I'm one of the children's occupational therapists. I'm normally based at Chowdean Children's Centre near the Angel of the North, but currently based at home. I'm going to tell my story through pictures and words because of my creative background. So my face will disappear and hopefully you'll have a slideshow coming up. Can I have my first slide, please? So I've been shielding and I've been working from home due to a chronic respiratory condition, which isn't usually an issue for me and doesn't normally affect my work. On top of that, this has been during a period when our team has been greatly depleted due to retirement, maternity leave, one redeployment and a member of staff moving to another trust. We've also until very recently been without a team lead, which has been quite an interesting challenge. Can I have the next slide? Oh no, this slide, the map's the right one, thank you. My working environment's usually incredibly varied and it includes clinic-based work, going out and visiting schools, home visits. I'm also part of the Autism Hub and we run parent support groups in the community. So you can imagine that my environment in which I work has shrunk greatly. The little orangey yellow arrow points to where my normal work base is, and some of the red markers are a handful of the schools that we normally go into. So the environment is normally huge. Next slide, please. So as an occupational therapist, I support children and young people to participate in daily activities or their occupations that they actually need and want to do in order to live a full and happy life. And this role also involves support for the family unit and the other key adults across the various settings. As OTs, we consider the child's strengths. We look at their interests, their needs, how they manage their self-care, their play, how they socialise, and how they manage their education. And very importantly, we also assess their environment and we look at how this supports or hinders their participation and engagement. We jointly plan with the family and we provide intervention, support and advice to help improve their participation, their performance and their well-being. Their optimal performance results from a very good fit between the three components that you can see in the middle of this slide. I really couldn't wish for a more useful knowledge base to support adapting to working from home. Occupational therapists are by their very nature function focused and creative problem solvers. We have an ongoing cycle of planning, evaluation, change and reflection that comes as standard really as part of our role as occupational therapists. So you can imagine my own personal fit between my work, my leisure, my self-care was completely thrown up in the air as the impact of the pandemic unfolded. And I started working from home from around about the first week of April. Can I have the next slide, please? So I've deliberately chosen this as a rather chaotic next slide in comparison to the last diagram. I had a very optimistic and really quite unrealistic start. There was a kind of elation, a sense of heightened mood and a new challenge on the horizon, a feeling of I'm an occupational therapist. Yes, I can really do this. And on day one, I started a sketch note journal, of which this is the first page. I managed to do about 3 weeks and then it became too time consuming. And perhaps the need for me at that point slightly ebbed away. I used it as a form of reflection at the end of every day. How'd that day gone? What was different? What was important? It gave me a kind of control about my day because of my creative background. So this page shows a chaotic jumble of hurdles and solutions and really non-stop activity that first day. I sat down thinking I could get straight to work and then my computer told me this wasn't the case. I needed to drive to the QE to connect with the internet there, but my very old Polo broke down and I had to get the AA to come and rescue me, and I finally did get to the QE. So it was one of those days where nothing actually went to plan, and what I really learned from that day was I had to have much more realistic expectations if I was going to make this work. Can I have the next slide, please? A few days into my sketch notes, I wrote, who do I really want to be right now? And then further down, acknowledge the fear and park it over there. On the facing page, I wrote, I want to be there for my family. And then below another sketch, I wrote, I need to be needed. I need to be useful. I want to be effective in helping keep the children's OT service running. Remember, this is at a time when we didn't have a team lead and there were very few of us on the ground. Can I have the next slide, please? But who I wanted to be needed to find a realistic balance. On the left-hand page, I appreciate this will be quite small on your screen because there's a lot of drawing there. But I've chosen this page because it illustrates one of the harder problems that was for me to solve working from home, because we deal with a lot of equipment as occupational therapists. So I really had to look at what was going to be possible when I couldn't be physically at my work base, and how I could adapt my approach to still meet the needs of the children, but also support my colleagues and find a good fit between what roles I could take on and my skills and my changed work environment could match with, and what my colleagues who are still at Chowdean Children's Centre could realistically pick up. On the other side, on the right-hand side of that sketchbook, you'll see my first impressions of working from home, and I've used lots of words about changing space. There were 3 of us working from home for the first period, my 17-year-old son and my husband and myself. So it was a massive negotiating, and a lot of tolerance and understanding was required on all sides. The sun and the moon are to reflect that work quickly broke the boundaries between day and evening, because there was a lot of negotiating and working space out. Work quickly moved into the evening, and that was something I had to claw back, and I needed managers to remind me to balance my days better. Next slide, please. My son is very accustomed to me reinforcing movement breaks as an occupational therapist, and one day near the beginning he said, "I need a motion break." But I was in another room and I heard an emotion break, and I thought, what a fantastic idea. And this actually became a daily phrase for us, and it would trigger a hug, a cup of tea, a walk, a shared activity, maybe some quiet time alone, because we were all cooped up together. Thinking about emotions, some days were deeply satisfying, days that, you know, I can handle it all days. I might have helped a family, I might have had some lovely feedback, I might have had a particularly good supervision session, a neighbour might have shared a bag of sugar, you know, the lovely things that happen in life. And other days were very tense and very exhausting, the fragile and small days, I called them in my sketch notes. So things like missing the workplace, missing conversations by the kettle, all those other things that a work role bring in addition to work, the environment, the people that you work with, your relationships, tensions naturally at home because we're all trying to work at home. We've never done that before. Domestic chores. I've never seen so much washing up as working from home with other people at home. Seriously, teaspoons would disappear by 11 o'clock in the morning. Days after poor sleep, troubled sleep, extraordinary dreams with, you know, really strange and, you know, just quite distressing imagery some nights, which were linked to the fear that I managed to suppress during the day by keeping incredibly busy. And the exhaustion of emotions in very quick cycle. So joy, frustration, fear, feeling vulnerable, feeling relief that I was able to work at home. Anger, guilt, which has already been talked about, guilt that I wasn't there down on the ground with my colleagues who are facing a very different work life every day. Hysterical laughter as a stress response, sadness as well, quiet reflection, absolutely exhausting. And those emotions they could rotate very quickly, or I might have a quite stable day. And more than once, in fact daily, I just say thank goodness I'm an occupational therapist and I have some of the skills to deal with this, but it's much harder doing it yourself than it is advising a family or a young person. Can I have the next slide, please? So work from home has been a constant balancing act. Working at a distance, because I've been sort of invisible but not invisible, I felt I needed to do more, and this has come from me, certainly not from the team and certainly not from management who've reminded me to, whoa Saskia, hold up for a minute. I've just needed to feel that I needed to do more because I wasn't in the workplace, and that's part of the guilt, I think, of not being on the ground with the others. My work-life balance has constantly been wildly askew as I try to balance my work roles, my responsibilities, home life, constant learning, and an awful lot of change like the rest of us. And the chap in the middle was taken from a postcard that my father sent me when I was a student, and trying to balance being an occupational therapy student, working at night at a cafe, and all of the other things going on. So I keep this pinned up on my wall. I love this image. He's actually an Italian hat. I think he's Italian. He's a hat seller anyway. Next slide, please. So what has helped regain some of the balance and bring back a bit of joy in those darker moments? Well, I live in a fabulous community. The local shops have been amazing. The neighbours have been amazing. Connection with others has been absolutely critical. Humour, creativity, making things. mindfulness, stopping and just listening to the rain falling through the trees, maybe listening to a podcast I might not have usually listened to, eating well, sharing meals with family, creating a quiet space at the end of the day, and learning things that aren't connected to work on virtual platforms, but I find inspire work, creative work, thought processes. At the moment, I'm doing a course on shadow puppets on a Monday evening, but funnily enough, it links with a lot of things I'm doing because of the creative thought processes. Strangely, Zoom, well, maybe not strangely, Zoom meetings with friends became less appealing because I'd spent the whole day in front of a screen. Next slide, please. So communication in all its forms has been absolutely vital in supporting working from home. Admin support has been essential and valued. Having a work laptop and a work phone, and fabulous support from IT when I phone up with ridiculous questions, and they've always been very kind and patient. Celebrating each other as a team, checking in with colleagues, my manager checking in with me, making sure I'm all right and what I need. Actively using my OT skills, really feeling that I'm using what I trained for and that I'm still doing my role. Our skill mix within the team and the distribution of cases and optimizing resources. I can do some things from here, they're better at doing some things from the ground. I've done quite a bit of COVID specific project work, and that's helped me going because I felt useful and purposeful. Feeling responsible for others in the team through supervision and mentoring role has really kept me going because there's others I need to look out for too. Staying creative is right up there. Definitely acknowledging the challenges, not hiding from them. I'm very aware that 20+ years as an OT has stood me in good stead because I've got such a knowledge base to work from. Ergonomics came along. My posture was appalling at the beginning, but I'm now looking after my ergonomics and I'm now learning to put work away at the end of the day. And my final slide. Can I have the last one? Thank you. This is a picture of me aged 3 and my new baby brother is in that elderly pram. My mother and my granny are beside me and we're striding out in the middle of a road in rural Scotland, surrounded by crackling force shield holding back the virus as I see it. And I've chosen this image because I think it represents what I feel is fundamentally important for work, wherever the base is, whether it's from home or whether it's from an actual work base. Sense of belonging and connection, support combined with permission to take initiatives, visibility, availability, confidence, and a feeling of safety, even when you can't be 100% certain of what you might meet round the next bend in the road. Thank you. And I'm now going to pass you on to Trudy Johnson.
Hello. Hi, my name is Trudy Johnson. I'm the North Eastern Yorkshire Cervical Screening Manager. This was a new service that the Trust acquired, and my job as a manager through the COVID time has been quite a challenge. It was, as I say, it was a brand new service that we were rolling out, and we took on Sheffield, which was our last area, in January, and we it was a new process for everybody, and trying to get processes embedded in. We were just at that point when COVID hit, really, and we ended up with a backlog of cytology. So I have to say the staff have been absolutely amazing throughout all of this, and we've had most of our staff in throughout the time clearing off the backlog. We had 2 staff who were officially shielded and received the letter, and we had 1 member of staff who, following risk assessment and had some underlying health conditions which had yet to be fully diagnosed, we made an agreement that she would go off and shield as well. Maria is one of our trainee cyto screeners, and again, to support the service we do need to get some trainee cyto screeners trained, and that is a process that takes 2 years from start to finish. So COVID was a big pause in that, and we had some training planned, but that had to be cancelled because of COVID. So as a manager, I did my best to try and get the trainer to come to Gateshead and deliver the training here, but it was essential that they actually went down to the training school. So we did a lot of work making sure it was going to be safe for the trainees to go down there. One of the members of staff was the lady that had been asked to shield, but she was very conscious that she didn't want to miss out on that training opportunity and really wanted to be involved. The team of 5 were excellent in keeping communication with that trainee and making sure she was kept in the loop of what was happening that week, and kind of trying to reassure her at the time that she wasn't missing anything, kind of thing, you know, and that they were managing. So I had quite lengthy conversations with her, and we agreed that she would go on this training, and we were assured by the training school that they could give the social distance, and we managed to find a hotel that was open for key workers and that they could accommodate some of the needs of the staff, because again, when the initial training was on, it was during Ramadan, and I was really concerned about our staff being able to find somewhere to eat at that time. So you know, it was something that we really had to look into, but we managed to arrange the training from when Ramadan was finished, so that the staff would be able to eat at a time when there would be restaurants open and or food outlets open that they could get food from. We did regular, we did the risk assessments, and we tried to reassure staff that the processes that we had in place were going to protect them. Some of the other departments did allow staff to go home on rotation, but because we had the backlog, we still needed the staff to be in there. So we just stressed the social distancing, and obviously at the time nobody was wearing masks because that wasn't a requirement. But subsequently we found out that there was a couple of people that had the antibodies, so there had been people positive but nobody had caught the virus. So I think that was reassuring, and I was trying to reiterate that to staff to make them feel a little bit more comfortable with that. I did, because of this, the staff were shielding again to try and keep them included. I did some of their appraisals over the phone, talking them through what was happening. I did keep in regular contact with the staff, and we talked them through at length before they did come back, and kind of did a reorientation when they came back, and made sure that I caught up with them to make sure that they were happy and they were that they felt comfortable with what we had in place. So it is a challenge, and the work has ramped back up again. So it's an ongoing challenge for me, really. And I'm going to pass over now to Colleen Knox.
Hello there. So my name's Colleen Knox. I'm an HR business partner, worked for the Trust for a few years now, and I'm a member of the D-Ability Staff Network, so work with Maria and the other members of the network to, if you like, advance and champion equality for people with disabilities or long-term health conditions. I've got a presentation we can turn to just now. Oh, sorry, back to the first slide. Thank you very much. Oh, it's gone down again. So if we can just have the very first slide, if that's okay. Lovely, thank you. So we wanted to have a very short staff survey just to try and capture people's views during COVID of shielding and their other experiences. It was intended to be quite short. We only had a small number of questions, and it went out in the QE Weekly for a couple of weeks, so not for a very long period of time. But we're really pleased because we had 38 people responded to the survey, which isn't a big figure when you consider that about 21% of our staff will actually say in the the survey annually that actually they have a disability or a long-term health condition. And I just wanted to add here that often I think we think of people with disability or with long-term health conditions as being vulnerable, and the language is tricky a little bit, isn't it? Because they're not vulnerable people, but sometimes things like COVID can put them in that vulnerable position. So that's really why we try and work with people to understand their health needs. So if we have the next slide, please. So you'll start to see here some of the questions that we actually asked people. So just to explain, we wanted it to look very much like the staff survey questions, because that's very much what we're familiar with filling in. And you might remember from the staff survey questions that it says things like, do I strongly disagree? Do I disagree? Do I neither agree nor disagree? Do I strongly agree? Do I agree? And that's so that we can try and have a positive and a negative score. So when you're looking through the questions and we're talking about the findings, everything in red is the negative score. That's the score that we don't want to see. Everything in green is the positive score, and that's very much the score that we want to see. But it's really important that we do look at the neutral scores, the neither disagree nor agree, because sometimes that actually tells us an awful lot about what staff views are. So if I look at the second question there, I have adequate materials, supplies and equipment to do my work. 74% was actually the highest score that we got for the survey, but we still had 18% of staff saying that unfortunately they didn't have adequate materials. If we look at the third question, has your employer made adequate adjustments to enable you to carry out your work? Again, 58% was the joint second highest score. But that's still, you know, not significantly high. And we have 24% of staff saying that unfortunately they actually don't have adequate materials, adequate adjustments to carry out their work. And actually at 58%, that's a little bit lower than the national staff survey figures that we usually get for that question. The next one is, have you received adequate support from your line manager? And again, that's 58%. But you can see there that we still have 26% of staff who actually don't have access to that information. And then when we look at, do you feel your workplace is disabled friendly, that drops down to 42%. And actually we see quite a high negative score at 32%. So actually we need to look into that to try and explore what's going on there. So if you have the next slide, please. So as a disabled person, I have a choice in deciding how to do my work. Now that was 41%. But what was interesting was that at 38%, the neutral score was actually the highest that we got from the survey. So there's an awful lot of staff saying that they neither agree nor disagree with that statement. Were you informed about the Disability Staff Network? Was only 37%. Which was a real surprise because we felt that we'd done quite a lot of promotion already. So again, 55% of staff said that they hadn't heard about the Disability Staff Network. Did you receive support from other sources such as the staff networks or peer support? Again, interesting because that was only 29%. And we've heard from quite a few people throughout the webinar today about how they've been supporting staff health and wellbeing. So that was a bit of a surprise. Particularly when we did ask staff to give us some written information as well as actually just answering the survey. And when we looked at things like the written information, what we found was that staff were able to identify different sources. So the next question, did you receive support from sources such as the staff network or peer support? Again, that 29%, 47% didn't, was interesting because people could list occupational health, ergonomics, the VivUp sort of employee assistance programme. They listed getting information in leaflets, through information online, through managers cascading information, but actually only 29% of staff spoke about that. The last two questions were very much about mental health, and because we've actually put this in descending order, what you've got is a question, have you received any support for this in terms of mental health next? Because 24% of staff said that they had. 43% of staff said that they hadn't though. And obviously 32% of staff answered that in the negative, which is unfortunate. And then finally, I think going back to some of the work that Kerry did, was your mental health affected by the pandemic? And a huge 61% of staff said yes, it was. So obviously that was perhaps to be expected, but it's an interesting figure. 21% of staff said that it wasn't, and obviously we had 18% of staff in the neutral score. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. What we've now got are some quotes in relation to, you know, some of the things that staff said to us, and we've included these just to try and give people a feel for how varied they are. So I'm not going to go through and read all of them, but I think what we see here is a range of information about the workplace. So actually what we've got is a lot of staff saying that they feel that work was adjusted, they were supported and things worked particularly well for them. But then also we've got some staff, I'm thinking of the quote at the bottom, who've perhaps, you know, that work-life balance was affected because they were working from home some of the time and the equipment or their workstation wasn't appropriate. So if you have the next slide, please. And also in terms of views of managers, because managers are so key in actually connecting people to the workplace. So again, a range of views there from managers being able to understand and be supportive or adjust things. Some staff actually saying, you know, my job's clinical and it's really challenging to adjust it. But equally, some staff saying, you know what, I haven't had a catch up from my manager, I haven't had some support from my manager at the other extreme. So basically, we identified a number of themes from this, and I think the final slide sums it all up. There you go. So we identified that there were still issues around shielding, health and well-being, and that double whammy of home life being disrupted or affected as well as your working life. Mental health awareness was massive, awareness of invisible disabilities generally. The need to promote compassionate leadership is a key, and the need for a range of reasonable adjustments, whether that's equipment, working practices, shifts, things like that, but also to ensure that they're actually carried out in practice. There was an ask that there's some education to make people aware, whether that's colleagues, co-workers, whether that's line managers, by people with disabilities to create that more inclusive culture. And obviously going back to the staff survey result that we talked about earlier, promote the D-Ability staff network and other sources of support. So we've shared the fuller report and a fuller presentation as a network, and we've talked about some of the things that we can do to look at our actions in the future. And I know Maria's very much going to be leading that work as we carry on forward. So I think I can probably hand back over to Mark to do the question and answer session now.
The first question is, if Gateshead goes into second lockdown, would staff with underlying health conditions be asked to shield again? That first question goes to Colleen.
Thanks very much, Mark. We haven't received any new national guidance in relation to shielding, and obviously we're very much led by what's happening nationally. So we've already sent out a COVID update to everybody on the email system. Look out for those lovely blue COVID updates. And what that basically says is if we hear anything, then we'll advise people. But what we're actually saying to managers is use this as an opportunity to review that risk assessment. If you need to make further reasonable adjustments or consider changes, and that's an opportunity to do so. We've also extended the HR advisory helpline a little bit so that that is now open 8 till 5 Monday to Friday and 9 till 1 on a Saturday and Sunday, just in case people want any information. But I think for me, it's very much about good, effective two-way communication. So where that person's got a concern, can they go and have a chat with their manager about what that concern is, and can that be looked at perhaps with the risk assessment?
Okay, thanks, Colleen. The second question is, if most of the staff is asked to work from home, how the managers will make sure they are included? That goes to Trudy.
Hi. I did talk about keeping in touch with the staff. One of the things, the challenges I have is that a lot of the work has to be done in the workplace because it's microscope based, or we're opening samples and things like that. And as I said, our work is back up to full capacity. So if the shielders do have to go back off, I do have a plan for one of the trainee sighter screeners, and we're in the process of trying to get a camera set up on a microscope so we could do team training sessions with the team, and they could join in via Teams. I've already spoken to IT with regard to getting a laptop if that does become something that needs to be done. So I think, and I just think we're going to have to have a lot more Teams meetings with staff, so that it's not just a telephone call, because I think it's much better if you can see someone face to face.
Okay, thanks, Judy. The third question is, flu season is fast approaching. What's the Trust flu jabs planned for staff with underlying health conditions if they are asked to shield again? That goes to Claire.
Claire, I think your microphone's on mute.
So, sorry about that. I didn't realise I was on mute. Okay, yeah. So we're going to be delivering the flu vaccine slightly differently to how we've done in the past. We're going to have to walk the wards. We're not going to be able to offer appointments in the occupational health department like we usually do. We have got something in place that if the COVID increases and we need to revert to an appointment-based system, we've already got this ready in place, and the appointments will be run from the PCAS unit. So that means if staff were shielding, they wouldn't have to come into the hospital to have the vaccine. They could access that at the PCAS unit, and also the GP, your GP would be able to offer you the vaccination as well. Okay. Sorry about being on mute.
Hi Claire, thanks for that. Happens to the best with even those that work in IT. The fourth question is, mental health problems on the rise since COVID. Are we monitoring our staff's mental health? What extra support has been offered, and are there any evidence that it's working? That goes to Kerry.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so there's three different parts of that question. I think the first bit about, are we reviewing staff's mental health? The answer is yes, we're always reviewing sickness absence data. And even before COVID, we know that absence due to stress, anxiety and depression is far and above the highest reason for sickness absence. So even before COVID, that is, you know, a lot of our focus was in that area. What COVID's done is really focus that attention on health and well-being and mental health in particular. Also done is we've been able to access some funding as a result of COVID. If you think of Captain Tom and the millions that he raised, and we're really grateful for the help that our charity and the NHS charities together, the help that they've been giving us, because actually we've been able to access things that we might not have previously. So in terms of reviewing the data, in March, when we look at the difference in the figures between March and now, The very first month, actually in April, sickness absence due to stress, anxiety and depression went down quite significantly. It went down by about 6%, which was quite surprising. But then do we think actually people were just sort of, it was that initial adrenaline rush possibly? What happened in May was that it jumped very, very significantly. So it has been coming down month on month since then. So May is actually the only time that it's increased, but the difference between March and August is about 4.5%. We've got about 4 more people off with stress, anxiety and depression than we did in March. So in terms of the extra support that we've put in place, I touched on it a little bit previously. The established mental health support that we already offer. But in addition to that, we've been able to increase counselling hours, and that's in-house with our own counsellors, with bank counsellors. We've had access to the Employee Assistance Programme, which has a 24-hour helpline, has lots of access to self-help materials, particularly around CBT, and access to telephone counselling for everybody. We've had the retreat days, which were provided by the Recovery College Collective, and that's a collaboration of mental health service providers and organisations. Everyone who attended one of those days talked about the benefits of that in terms of supporting their mental health. Project Wingman, so there was the fun side of Project Wingman, which the people who experienced that will know about, but there was also the staff that were looking after that project from the airline. We're all trained in dealing with critical situations and crisis situations, and they were really able to offer in the moment support to people who needed it. There's lots more planned, but obviously we're continually monitoring that. And I suppose the last bit around, is there evidence that it's working? It's possibly too soon to tell for the longer term impact. We have, like I say, since May, for the last 3 months, absence due to stress, anxiety and depression has gone down every month. Is that due to the interventions? Again, it's probably too soon to answer that question. But I think what I would say is that we're very aware that we've got a duty to support our staff through this really challenging time. We're constantly reviewing what we offer and trying to look at what's working, what are people finding effective, what are people finding less effective. And although I'm very aware of survey fatigue, we're probably going to start trying to ask people some of these questions about what are we doing that's working and what are we doing that's maybe not working so well, because we're very open to feedback. And I think that's all I'm going to say on that. Sorry, that were not Mark.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you for all the contributors today. Thanks for all the presentations and the talks, very informative. Thanks for everybody that's tuned in. We'll be doing more webinars in the future, looking to do ones around raising awareness of invisible disabilities. And do please join the network. Just search for the Digability email in your address book, send an email and get details of the latest meetings, and the webinar details will be sent out in comms. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending.